The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the kingdom's roads into rivers of mud that swallowed wagon wheels whole. Seraphina Ashcroft pressed her forehead against the cold window of the medical carriage, watching the landscape blur into shades of gray and brown, feeling the vehicle lurch with every rut and hole in the ancient road. She was 29 years old enough to know when something felt wrong in her bones. The convoy moved like a wounded serpent through the downpour, 6 carriages carrying medical supplies and healers toward the capital at the Alpha King's summons. Sera sat across from Liana Emberthorn, her fellow combat medic, and the closest thing she had to a friend after 3 years serving together in the northern border conflicts. "We should have waited," Liana muttered, her face pale in the dim afternoon light. "The storm warnings were clear enough." Sera didn't answer. What would be the point? When the Alpha King summoned healers to his court, you didn't delay because of weather. Even junior medics like them, barely worth noticing in the grand scheme of pack politics and territorial alliances that ruled the kingdom of Lysander. The carriage tilted dangerously to the left. Sera grabbed the leather strap hanging from the ceiling, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see they were crossing the old stone bridge over Serpent's Gorge, a crossing she'd always hated, even in good weather. The river below ran swollen and angry, carrying broken branches and debris in its churning brown waters. "This doesn't feel right," Sera whispered, more to herself than Liana. The words had barely left her lips when the world turned sideways. The sound came first, a crack like thunder, but sharper, more final. The bridge. Something in the ancient stonework had given way. Their carriage lurched violently, throwing Liana against Sera, both of them tangling in a heap of limbs and fabric. Through the chaos, Sera heard the driver scream, heard horses shriek in terror, and then they were falling. Not fast, not clean. They tilted, scraped against stone, metal shrieking against rock. Sera's shoulder slammed into the door. Liana's elbow caught her cheek. Everything became chaos of sound and motion, and the iron taste of fear flooding her mouth. The impact stole her breath. Water exploded through the carriage door, shockingly cold. And suddenly Sera understood with crystal clarity that they were going to die here, trapped in a wooden box at the bottom of a raging river. "The door!" Liana screamed, clawing at the handle above them. "It's jammed!" Water poured in through every crack and seam, rising with terrifying speed. Already it was past Sera's waist, soaking through her dress, heavy and cold as death itself. Her lungs burned. She kicked at the window, but the thick glass held firm. Then she heard it, another sound cutting through the roar of water and Liana's panicked sobs. A deeper crash, the groan of metal and wood. Something else had gone into the river. There. Liana pointed through the murky water now filling their compartment. Through the distorted glass, Sera could see another carriage, larger, ornate, painted in deep crimson and gold, the royal colors. Her healer's training kicked in before conscious thought could stop her. Someone was in that carriage, someone who needed help, someone who would die if she did nothing. "We have to get out first!" Liana grabbed Sera's arm, but Sera was already forcing her way toward the upper door, the one now above their heads. The water gave her buoyancy, helped her climb. Her fingers found the handle, slippery with river water, and her own panicked sweat. It opened. Thank the old gods it opened. Sera pulled herself through, breaking the surface of the water with a gasp that felt like her first real breath. The current tried to pull her under immediately, but she grabbed the overturned carriage, splinters digging into her palms. Liana surfaced behind her, coughing and crying, "Swim for the bank, go!" But Sera was already looking at the royal carriage, already seeing it sink faster than theirs had, weighed down by heavier construction and ornate fittings. Already watching it tilt toward the deepest part of the gorge where the current ran strongest. "There's someone in that carriage," Sera said. "Are you insane? You'll die!" Maybe. Probably. But Sera could already see the royal carriage sinking, could see movement through the distorted glass, could feel in her gut that someone needed her, and she was the only one close enough to help. She didn't let herself think. Thinking would mean acknowledging what a foolish, impossible thing she was about to attempt. Instead, she pushed off from their carriage and let the current carry her toward the crimson and gold wreckage. The water was so cold it felt like knives against her skin. Her dress wrapped around her legs, trying to drag her down. She kicked hard, arms burning as she fought to reach the royal carriage before it disappeared completely beneath the surface. Her fingers caught the golden trim of a door handle. Held. She pulled herself closer, pressed her face to the window, and her heart stopped. Inside, slumped against the far wall, was a man. Not just any man. Even through the murky water and distorted glass, she recognized him from the official portraits that hung in every government building across the kingdom. Strong jaw, dark hair, the bearing of someone born to command. Cale Stormborn, the Alpha King. He wasn't moving. The carriage lurched, sinking another few inches. Water was already halfway up the interior. Sera had minutes at most. She slammed her fist against the window, then grabbed a broken piece of bridge railing still floating nearby, used it like a hammer. Once, twice. On the third strike, the glass spiderwebbed. On the fourth, it shattered inward. Water rushed in through the opening with such force it nearly tore Sera away from the carriage. She held on, fingers screaming in protest, and shoved her head and shoulders through the broken window. "Your Majesty!" Her voice sounded strange, high and desperate. "Your Majesty, you have to move!" Nothing. He remained slumped, eyes closed, a dark bruise already forming across his temple. Blood mixed with the water rising around him. The carriage tilted further. They were running out of time. Sera squeezed through the window, glass tearing at her dress and skin, and crawled toward him through the rising water. Up close, he was even larger than she'd imagined. Easily over 200 pounds of solid muscle and authority. His formal jacket was torn, revealing the powerful build beneath. "Please," Sera whispered, reaching for his face, checking for breath, for a pulse. There. Faint, but there. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Alive. He was alive. Getting him out would be impossible. The logical part of her brain, the part trained in anatomy and physics, knew this absolutely. She was 5'6" and weighed perhaps 130 pounds soaking wet. He was a wall of unconscious muscle and bone. The carriage was sinking. The water was rising. Impossible. Sera grabbed him under the arms anyway. The first pull moved him perhaps an inch. The water helped, but his weight still made her arms feel like they might tear from their sockets. She planted her feet against the carriage wall and pulled again. Another inch. "Come on," she grunted, tears mixing with river water on her cheeks. "Come on, damn you, move!" A voice in her head asked what she thought she was doing. She was nobody, a junior healer from nowhere special. Her life was worth nothing compared to the Alpha King's. And yet here she was about to drown trying to save him when she should be saving herself. Sera pulled harder. His body shifted, sliding through the water toward the broken window. The carriage groaned, metal screaming. They had seconds now. Just seconds. She got his head and shoulders through the window, glass cutting into both of them. His blood or hers? She couldn't tell anymore. Everything hurt. Her muscles were on fire. Her lungs burned for air. The water was over her head now, and she was working blind, feeling alone. One more pull. One more impossible burst of strength she didn't have. His body came free of the carriage just as it rolled completely over, the ornate roof disappearing beneath the churning surface. The current caught them both, spinning them in the water. For a moment, Sera lost her grip on him entirely. No, not after all this. She lunged, caught his collar, held on with every ounce of determination she possessed. Her head broke the surface and she gasped, dragged in air that felt like fire, then kicked toward the bank. The current fought her for every inch. Her arms were wrapped around the Alpha King's chest, holding his head above water, kicking with legs that felt like lead. The bank seemed impossibly far away, the water so cold she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. But she could see people reaching out. Guards who'd made it to shore, hands extended toward them. "Almost there," Sera whispered to the unconscious king, or maybe to herself. "Almost there." Someone grabbed her arm, then another hand, and another. They pulled them both from the water, the Alpha King's massive form finally released from her desperate grip. Sera collapsed on the muddy bank, coughing up river water, her entire body shaking so violently she couldn't control it. "She saved him," someone said, voice filled with awe. "She actually saved the Alpha King." "Get the physician!" Another voice, sharp with command. "And someone get the girl a blanket before she freezes to death." Sera tried to sit up, to see if he was breathing, if he was alive, if all that impossible effort had meant anything. But her body had reached its limit. The world tilted, blurred. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the Alpha King's chest rising and falling with breath. Alive. They were both alive. Sera woke to whiteness. Not the peaceful white of fresh snow or clean linen, but the sterile, almost aggressive white of the palace medical wing. The ceiling above her seemed to glow with it, and for a disoriented moment she thought perhaps she had died after all. Then the pain arrived, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was very much alive. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest as she tried to move. Her shoulders felt like someone had tried to pull them from their sockets. Her hands were wrapped in bandages, and when she flexed her fingers experimentally, the cuts from the broken glass made themselves known with sharp, insistent stings. "Easy now." A woman's voice, calm and professional. A face appeared above her, middle-aged with kind eyes, and the silver insignia of a senior healer pinned to her collar. "You've been asleep for nearly 18 hours. Your body needed the rest." "The king?" Sera croaked, her throat raw. "Is he—" "Alive, thanks to you." The healer pressed a cup of water to Sera's lips, helped her drink. "Awake even, which is more than we expected given the head wound. You pulled off something remarkable, girl." The water helped, but questions tumbled through Sera's foggy mind faster than she could voice them. Where was she? What had happened to Liana? How many others had survived the bridge collapse? "You're in the royal medical wing of Thornfeld Palace," the healer continued, as if reading her thoughts. "Your friend Liana is fine. Minor injuries, mostly shock. The bridge collapse killed 4 people, including both drivers and 2 guards." She paused, shaking her head. "It would have been 6 if you hadn't— Well, His Majesty has been asking about you." Sera's heart stuttered. "He has?" "Every hour since he regained consciousness. Quite insistent about it, actually." A small smile played at the corner of the healer's mouth. "The guards have been taking shifts explaining that you needed rest. I don't think he's accustomed to being told to wait for anything." She helped Sera sit up slowly, adjusting pillows behind her back. Through the tall windows, Sera could see it was daytime, weak sunlight filtering through gray clouds. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. "There will be questions," the healer warned, her tone gentle but serious. "The Royal Guard, the Council. What you did has raised certain complications." "Complications?" Sera echoed, confused. She'd saved the king's life. What could be complicated about that? The healer hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Multiple witnesses reported seeing your hands glow during the rescue. Some claim it looked like healing magic from the old bloodlines, the kind that was eliminated during the purge 30 years ago." She paused, studying Sera's face. "Is there any truth to these claims?" Sera's blood ran cold. The purge. She knew the stories. Everyone did. 30 years ago, the King's Council had ordered the elimination of House Blackwell, claiming they were traitors plotting against the crown. Healers who could cure mortal wounds with a touch. Enhancers who could make common soldiers fight like champions. Power that had made them valuable and terrifying in equal measure. Power that had gotten every single one of them executed. "I'm just a combat medic," Sera said carefully. "I pulled the king from the water. In crisis situations, people see what they want to see. Miracles, magic, it's normal." "Of course." But the healer's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe it. "Well, His Majesty has ordered you moved to the guest wing once you're cleared for release. You're to be given quarters appropriate to someone who saved his life." Before Sera could process this information, the door opened. Not tentatively, not with a polite knock. It simply opened, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the air heavier. Cale Stormborn filled the doorway. He was dressed formally now, in dark clothing that emphasized the width of his shoulders and the predatory grace of his movements. The bruise on his temple had darkened to purple and black, a vivid reminder of how close he'd come to death. But his eyes, storm gray and intense, were alert and fixed on Sera with focus that made her breath catch. "Leave us," he said quietly, still looking at Sera. The healer departed without argument, closing the door softly behind her. The silence that followed felt enormous, pressing against Sera's ears. The Alpha King crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped at the foot of her bed. Up close, even injured and barely able to sit upright, Sera felt the weight of his presence like a physical thing. Power radiated from him, not threatening exactly, but undeniable. This was an alpha in truth, not just title. Someone whose wolf lived close to the surface, ancient and fierce and barely leashed. "You're awake." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough with something she couldn't quite identify. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Do you know what you've done?" Sera's fingers twisted in the blanket. "I pulled you from the carriage." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or disbelief. "You dragged 200 pounds of unconscious alpha through a raging river and somehow got us both to shore alive. My guards can't explain it. My healers can't explain it. The laws of physics apparently can't explain it." He leaned forward slightly, hands gripping the footboard of the bed. "So I'm asking you, how?" "I don't know," Sera admitted. The truth felt inadequate, but it was all she had. "I just couldn't leave you there." "Why not?" The question caught her off guard. "People die in service to their kingdom all the time. You could have saved yourself, should have saved yourself. Instead, you risked everything for someone you've never met. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Maybe both," Sera whispered. A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, but close. He studied her for a long moment, and Sera found herself unable to look away. His eyes held something she couldn't name. Curiosity, yes, but also something warmer, something that made her pulse quicken. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Seraphina Ashcroft, Your Majesty, but everyone calls me Sera." "Sera." He tested the name, and the way it sounded in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. "Tell me, Sera Ashcroft, what do you want?" "I don't understand." "Everyone wants something. Position, wealth, power, favor." His expression was unreadable. "You've earned all of it and more. The kingdom will want to reward you. I want to reward you. So tell me what you want." Sera thought about the question. Really thought about it. What did she want? To finish her medical training, to be good at something that mattered, to stop feeling invisible, like she took up space that someone more important should occupy. "I just want to help people," she finally said. "That's why I became a healer." Cale stared at her for a long moment, and she couldn't read the expression on his face. Then he straightened, releasing the footboard. "You'll stay at the palace," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "Finish your training here with the royal physicians, and you'll have quarters in the guest wing. Appropriate to someone who saved my life." "Your Majesty, I couldn't possibly—" "You saved my life, Sera." Something in the way he said her name made her skin warm. "That makes you valuable, and valuable people need to be protected." His expression softened almost imperceptibly, especially from those who might see you as threat rather than asset. "I'm not a threat to anyone." "No." His voice went quiet. "But you might be a threat to the wrong people's secrets, which is why I'm assigning you a personal guard, Commander Thaddeus Ironwood, the best protection I can offer." Before Sera could protest, he was moving toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back. "Rest. Heal. Tomorrow you'll meet the commander and begin settling into palace life." He paused. "And Sera, thank you for not letting me drown." Then he was gone, leaving Sera alone with thoughts that spun like leaves in wind. She'd saved the Alpha King, had revealed power she'd spent years hiding, had somehow caught the attention of the most powerful man in the kingdom, and something in the way he'd looked at her suggested this was only the beginning. 2 days later, Sera was moved to the guest wing. The room was 10 times the size of any space she'd ever occupied. Windows overlooking palace gardens, a bed large enough for 4 people, furniture that probably cost more than her family had earned in a year. A gown hung in the wardrobe, deep blue silk, the color of twilight, with silver embroidery along the bodice. A card lay beside it in precise handwriting, for the winter gathering K. Sera touched the fabric with bandaged fingers, feeling the impossible softness of it. The winter gathering, the most important social event of the year, where the kingdom's most powerful alphas and their packs came together to solidify alliances and demonstrate their strength. She'd heard stories about it. Elaborate displays of wealth and power, political maneuvering dressed as social grace, the kind of event where someone like her had no business attending. But apparently that had changed. She'd saved the Alpha King's life, and now she was being thrust into a world she didn't understand. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Sera opened it to find an older man standing in the corridor. Late 50s, weathered face, gray beard, cropped military short. Missing 2 fingers on his left hand. the kind of veteran who'd survived by being smarter and meaner than everyone trying to kill him. Seraphina Ashcroft? His voice carried the rasp of decades giving orders. Commander Thaddeus Ironwood, His Majesty has assigned me as your personal guard. I don't need a guard, Sera said, even though she suspected it was futile to argue. His Majesty disagrees. Thaddeus's expression was stern, but not unkind. May I come in? We should discuss the situation you found yourself in. Sera stepped aside, letting him enter. He looked around the room with the practiced eye of someone cataloging exits and vulnerabilities, then turned to face her. You pulled the Alpha King from a river and saved his life using power that witnesses claim looked like healing magic, Thaddeus said bluntly. Power that resembles the old bloodlines, the ones that were eliminated 30 years ago during the purge. He paused. Is it true? The direct question froze Sera. She'd been asked before, but always with diplomatic caution. Commander Ironwood showed no such restraint. I'm a combat medic, she said carefully. I did what I was trained to do. That's not an answer. Thaddeus moved to the window, stared out at the gardens. I'm not asking as someone who wants to harm you, girl. I'm asking as someone who's been ordered to protect you, and I can't do that effectively if I don't know what I'm protecting you from. Something in his tone made Sera reconsider. He sounded genuinely concerned, not threatening, not accusatory, just practical. In the northern conflicts, I discovered I could heal wounds that should have been fatal, Sera admitted quietly. Soldiers would come in dying, and sometimes, if I tried hard enough, I could pull them back. My hands would get warm. Sometimes they'd glow. She met his eyes. I thought it was just intense focus, adrenaline. I didn't know it was power, not until people started whispering about the old bloodlines. Thaddeus was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. That confirms what I suspected, which means we need to be very careful. He turned to face her fully. 30 years ago, the King's Council ordered the elimination of House Blackwell. They claimed it was because Blackwells were traitors. In truth, it was because they were too powerful. Healers who could enhance warriors, who could turn common soldiers into champions, who made rulers feel weak by comparison. I know the stories, Sera said. Then you know that having similar power makes you dangerous to certain people in positions of authority who don't want anyone questioning the purge's necessity. His expression hardened. The king wants you protected. I agree with that assessment. But protection requires you to be careful. No public displays of power. No healing where witnesses can see. No giving anyone reason to call you Blackwell. The name hung in the air between them. Blackwell, the bloodline that had been systematically erased, that had been hunted to extinction because their gifts threatened the balance of power. What happens if they find out? Sera asked quietly. Then we hope His Majesty's protection is enough. Thaddeus's voice carried weight of experience. He's a good king, better than his father, but he's bound by counsel and law. If they push hard enough for your arrest, he might not be able to stop them without starting a political crisis. So I hide, pretend to be normal. Hope no one looks too closely. Yes. Thaddeus's expression softened slightly. I know it's not fair. You saved his life. You should be celebrated, not hidden. But this is the world we live in. He paused. The winter gathering is in 5 days. You've been invited. That's both honor and test. The council will be watching. Other alphas will be assessing you. You need to be perfect, unremarkable. Just a skilled healer who got lucky. And if I can't manage that, then I'll do everything in my power to get you out safely. The promise in his voice was absolute. His Majesty gave me one job, keep you alive. I don't fail at jobs I'm given. Over the next 5 days, Sera settled into palace life with Thaddeus as constant shadow. He was professional, but not cold, protective, but not suffocating. And as the winter gathering approached, he coached her on palace politics and how to survive rooms full of predators. The council is 12 members, he explained during one of their sessions. Most are loyal to the king, but at least 3 supported the purge. Lord Ambrose Greystone in particular. He was young then, but I have reason to believe he was involved in ordering the elimination. How do you know? 30 years of paying attention. Thaddeus's expression was grim. The purge wasn't decided by committee. Someone specific gave the order. Someone with enough authority to make it happen. Ambrose was on the council even then, and he spent 3 decades making certain no one questions whether it was necessary. He'll be at the gathering? Yes, along with most of the kingdom's power structure. Thaddeus met her eyes. If your power is real, if you really do carry Blackwell bloodline somehow, he'll be watching for signs, for proof, for any excuse to eliminate what he sees as threat to his legacy. The implication was clear. The winter gathering wasn't just social event, it was test, evaluation, opportunity for those who'd ordered the purge to determine whether they'd missed anyone, whether Sera was loose end that needed tying off. The day of the winter gathering arrived gray and cold. Sera stood in her chambers staring at the blue gown, hands trembling slightly. In a few hours, she'd walk into the great hall and face hundreds of the kingdom's most powerful people. Alphas who could smell fear, council members who'd ordered genocide, social predators who would tear her apart if they sensed weakness. And somewhere in that crowd would be Kael, the Alpha King, the man she'd pulled from drowning, the man whose intense gray eyes had haunted her dreams since their first meeting. She dressed carefully, let palace servants arrange her hair into something approaching elegance, studied her reflection in the mirror, and tried to see what they would see. Pale hair, green eyes, too thin face from years of rationed meals and combat stress. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, nothing that screamed Blackwell survivor. Thaddeus knocked precisely at the appointed hour. "Ready?" "No," Sera admitted, "but I'll manage." They walked through the palace corridors toward the great hall. Sera could hear music and conversation growing louder with each step. Thaddeus stayed close, his presence solid and reassuring. "Remember," he said quietly, "you're just a healer. Nothing special. You saved the king through skill and determination. That's the story. Don't deviate from it." The doors to the great hall opened before them, and Sera's breath caught. The space was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across hundreds of faces. The air hummed with conversation and power. Everywhere she looked, she saw wealth and authority made visible. "Miss Seraphina Ashcroft," the herald announced, "guest of His Majesty, under protection of Commander Ironwood." Every eye turned. The conversation faltered. Sera felt the weight of their collective attention like physical pressure against her skin. Then Kael was there, materializing from the crowd with that predatory grace. He wore formal attire in deep charcoal, perfectly tailored to his powerful frame. The bruise on his temple had faded to yellowish shadow. His eyes found hers across the distance, and something in them steadied her. He crossed the room and extended his hand. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request, but his voice held warmth that hadn't been there in the medical wing. Sera placed her bandaged hand in his, feeling calluses there, the strength. His hand swallowed hers completely, and something about that felt right in ways she couldn't explain. The crowd parted as they moved through it, whispers following in their wake. Sera caught fragments of conversation. Saved his life. Just a healer. But her hands glowed. Unprecedented. Kael led her to a raised platform where several ornate chairs sat arranged like thrones. He guided her to the one beside his, not the largest, but unmistakably a position of honor. "Breathe," he murmured low enough that only she could hear. "They're just people. Powerful people, but people nonetheless." "That's not comforting, Your Majesty." It wasn't meant to be comforting. It was meant to be true. He settled into his own chair with easy confidence. "And when we're alone, you can call me Kael." Sera stared at him. "We're not alone. There are hundreds of people here." "Are there?" He gestured vaguely at the crowd. "I hadn't noticed." Despite everything, despite the fear and the overwhelming attention and the impossible situation, Sera almost smiled. The evening progressed in waves of formal presentations. Pack leaders approached the platform to pay respects, their eyes lingering on Sera with undisguised curiosity. Some were polite. Others were less subtle in their assessment, looking at her like she was piece on a game board they hadn't expected. A woman in crimson silk, Lady Vivian Crimsonvale of the Northern Territories, smiled at Sera with too many teeth. "How fascinating that such a small thing could accomplish such a feat. Tell me, Miss Ashcroft, do you have any alpha blood in your lineage?" "No, my lady, my family is unaffiliated." "Unaffiliated?" She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "How quaint. And yet here you sit in a place many would kill for." Her smile sharpened. "Luck is such a strange thing, isn't it?" "It wasn't luck," Kael said quietly. Ice formed in the air between them. "It was courage, something your pack would do well to remember the meaning of." Lady Vivian's smile never wavered, but she withdrew quickly after that. "You didn't need to defend me," Sera whispered when she'd gone. "Yes, I did." Kale was watching the crowd with hooded eyes. They're circling, trying to determine if you're weak enough to exploit or strong enough to fear. Every word I speak, every gesture I make toward you sets a precedent for how they'll treat you. A precedent for what? He turned to look at her fully. For whether they see you as under my protection or as fair game. The intensity of his gaze made Sera's breath catch. There was something in his eyes, something that went beyond duty or political calculation. Something that made her wonder if saving his life had created a connection she didn't fully understand. Before she could respond, a commotion at the far end of the hall drew everyone's attention. The temperature seemed to drop as a group entered. They moved with unified purpose, dressed in dark leather and fur, their faces marked with ritual scars. Shadow Ridge Pack, the most isolated, most traditional pack in the kingdom. And at their center walked a man who made even other alphas unconsciously retreat. Tall, nearly as tall as Kale, with black hair pulled back severely and eyes that reflected light like an animal's. Scars crossed his face and visible neck, speaking of battles survived and enemies destroyed. General Draven Wolfcrag, war hero, exile, legend. He approached the platform with deliberate slowness, his pack flanking him in show of unified strength. When he stopped before them, he didn't bow, didn't show any of the deference others had offered. Your Majesty. His voice was deep, grinding like stone on stone. I heard rumors you'd gone soft, nearly drowned like a pup in a stream. Draven. Kale's tone remained level, but Sera felt tension coiling in him. Still compensating for your inadequacies with dramatic entrances, I see. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. No one spoke to General Draven that way. His eyes slid to Sera. This is her, the little dove who supposedly dragged you from the river. He studied her with predator's intensity. Tell me, girl, do you have any idea what you've started? I saved a life, Sera said, forcing her voice steady. That's all. That's everything. Draven's scarred face was unreadable. In this world, saving an Alpha King means being bound to him, protected by him, owned by him, some would say. He looked back at Kyle. I hope you understand what you've claimed, old friend, because I don't think she does. She's under my protection, Kale said. Each word carried weight. By choice, not claim. Is she? Draven's expression suggested he didn't believe it. We'll see. This gathering lasts 3 days. Plenty of time to discover what she really is, what she really wants. He gestured to his pack. We'll be watching, with great interest. They departed, leaving tension crackling in their wake. Sera realized she'd been holding her breath, released it slowly. What did he mean? She asked Kale quietly. About being bound to you? Old traditions, old laws. Kale's jaw was tight. In ancient times, saving an alpha's life created a debt, a bond. The saved alpha was obligated to protect their savior, to honor them. He paused. Some believe that bond is more than social contract, that it's something deeper, something that ties wolf to savior. Do you believe that? He looked at her, really looked at her. And in his storm-gray eyes, Sera saw something that made her heart race. I don't know, but I feel something, have felt it since I woke up and learned what you did. Something that says you're important, that you matter beyond just saving my life. The words hung between them, heavy, significant, promising something Sera wasn't sure either of them understood yet. The rest of the evening blurred together. More introductions, more careful conversations, more feeling like she was walking through minefield where every step could be fatal. By the time the gathering finally ended, Sera was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. Kale walked her back to her chambers personally, Thaddeus trailing at respectful distance. At her door, Kale stopped. You did well tonight, better than I expected. I was terrified the entire time. I know, but you didn't show it. That's what matters in rooms like that. His expression softened. Get rest. Tomorrow night will be more of the same, but it will get easier. Will it? Eventually. He reached out, and Sera thought for a moment he was going to touch her face. Instead, his hand fell to his side. Good night, Sera. Good night, Your Majesty. Kale, he corrected gently. When it's just us, it's Kale. He left before she could respond. Sera entered her chambers and closed the door, leaning against it heavily. Thaddeus waited in the corridor, ever vigilant. And somewhere in the palace, the Alpha King was thinking about her. She was certain of it, just as she was thinking about him. about storm-gray eyes and a voice that said her name like prayer, about a bond neither of them fully understood but both felt pulling them together, about the impossible, dangerous, inevitable connection forming between a girl who'd pulled a king from drowning and the alpha who was starting to believe she'd saved more than just his life. She'd saved something in him he'd thought lost forever, and that made her more dangerous than any bloodline power ever could. The second night of the winter gathering brought different challenges. Where the first had been about presentation and survival, the second was about testing, about proving she belonged in spaces where power was currency and weakness meant death. Sera stood before the mirror in her chambers, adjusting the emerald gown that had appeared in her wardrobe with another note in Kale's precise handwriting. "This color suits you better, Kay." The gown did suit her. Deep green that made her eyes luminous and her pale hair seemed to glow. Cut to flatter without being ostentatious. The kind of dress that said confidence without arrogance. Exactly what she needed for tonight. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Not Thaddeus's authoritative rap. This knock was different, tentative, almost apologetic. Sera opened the door to find Liana standing in the corridor. Her friend looked different somehow. Harder. Her red hair was arranged in elaborate style, and she wore a dress that suggested someone had decided to invest in her appearance. "Liana," Sera stepped back, gesturing her inside. "I've been worried. You haven't visited since you moved to the guest wing and became the Alpha King's favorite?" Liana's voice carried edge Sera hadn't heard before. "Since you started attending winter gatherings and sitting beside royalty while the rest of us are dismissed as insignificant?" The words stung. "That's not fair. I didn't ask for any of this." "No. You just saved the king's life and accidentally stumbled into power and position the rest of us could never dream of achieving." Liana crossed her arms. "Do you know what they're saying? That you used magic, that you're one of the bloodlines that should have been eliminated, that His Majesty is either blind or besotted to keep you so close." "I'm not," Sera started, but Liana cut her off. "I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here to warn you." Her expression shifted from bitter to concerned. "Lord Ambrose Greystone has been asking questions about your background, your training, your family history. He's looking for proof that you're more than you claim." Sera's blood went cold. Ambrose, the council member Thaddeus had warned her about, the one who'd possibly ordered the purge 30 years ago. "What kind of questions? Where you trained, who your parents were, whether anyone in your bloodline showed unusual abilities." Liana stepped closer. "Sera, if you are what they whisper you might be, you need to be careful. Ambrose doesn't just eliminate threats. He erases them, makes them disappear like they never existed." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we were friends. Because I've seen you save too many lives to watch you throw yours away on pride or stupidity." Liana's voice softened slightly. "And because whoever you are, whatever power you might have, you don't deserve to be hunted for it." She left before Sera could respond. The door closed with soft click that somehow felt like ending, like friendship fracturing under weight of jealousy and fear and impossible circumstances. Thaddeus appeared minutes later, his weathered face showing concern. "Everything all right? I saw Liana leaving. She came to warn me about Lord Ambrose." "Smart girl." Thaddeus's expression darkened. "Ambrose was at the gathering last night. I saw him watching you, cataloging details, comparing your face to memories of Blackwells he helped kill." He paused. "We need to be extra careful tonight. No displays, no healing, nothing that gives him ammunition." "What if I can't avoid it? What if someone gets hurt and I'm the only healer available?" "Then you let them die." Thaddeus's voice was hard, absolute. "Your life matters more than theirs. His Majesty understands this. He'd rather let a dozen nobles bleed out than risk you revealing what you are." The coldness in his tone shocked Sera, but she understood the logic, harsh calculus of survival in a world where being special meant being eliminated. They walked to the great hall together. Tonight the crowd seemed larger, more predatory. Word had spread about the mysterious healer who sat beside the Alpha King, about the girl with glowing hands who'd pulled him from death. Everyone wanted to see, to assess, to determine whether she was threat or opportunity. Kale was waiting on the platform. He stood when he saw her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. Not just political interest, something warmer, something that suggested he'd been thinking about her since they'd parted last night. "Sera." He took her hand, and the contact sent warmth through her entire body. Not magic, just his touch, just the feeling of his calloused fingers against her bandaged palm. "You look stunning." "The dress was your choice, Your Majesty." "Kael," he corrected, low enough that only she could hear. "And yes, I chose it hoping you'd wear it, hoping you'd trust my judgment." He led her to her seat. "There's someone I want you to meet tonight, someone important." Before she could ask who, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A woman entered, not young but not old either, perhaps mid-40s, moving with fluid grace of someone who'd spent decades learning to walk through shadows. Silver threaded through her black hair, keen eyes that missed nothing. "Isolde Nightshade," Kael said quietly. "General Draven's sister, former royal assassin, current spymaster." He paused. "And someone who knows more about the purge than anyone alive except those who ordered it." Sera's heart hammered as Isolde approached. The woman studied her with predator's intensity, then turned to Kael. "So this is the girl everyone's talking about." Isolde's voice was cool, assessing. "The healer who accomplished the impossible." "This is Seraphina Ashcroft," Kael said, "under my protection." "Yes, I heard." Isolde's gaze never left Sera. "I also heard her hands glowed during the rescue, that it looked remarkably like Blackwell healing magic, the kind that was supposedly eliminated 30 years ago." She paused. "Curious, isn't it? How ghosts sometimes refuse to stay dead." The words hung in air like accusation. Sera felt every eye in the room watching, waiting to see how she'd respond. "I'm a combat medic," Sera said carefully, "trained in the northern conflicts. What people saw was stress and crisis distorting normal healing techniques." "Of course." Isolde's smile was sharp, "because the alternative would be that the purge failed, that someone survived, that the council's genocide was incomplete." She glanced at Kael. "Awkward if true, for everyone involved." "Is there a point to this interrogation?" Kael's voice carried warning. "Just curiosity, Your Majesty." Isolde's expression softened fractionally. "And a word of advice for the young lady. If she is what whispers suggest, she should be very careful, because the people who ordered the purge are still alive, still in power, and still very much interested in making certain their work stays finished." She withdrew, leaving Sera shaking. Kael's hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. "Don't let her frighten you. Isolde tests everyone. It's how she determines who's worth protecting and who isn't." "And what did she determine about me?" "That you're brave, that you're hiding something, and that I care about you more than is politically wise." He met her eyes. "She's right on all 3 counts." The admission hung between them. Sera felt her breath catch. "Your Majesty." "Kael." "Kael," she amended. "You barely know me. We've spoken maybe 3 times. How can you—" "Because I felt it." His voice dropped lower. "Intimate. Felt it from the moment I woke up and learned what you'd done. Something connecting us, something beyond gratitude or debt. My wolf recognized you, claimed you, and I've spent 2 days trying to convince myself it's just the bond of life debt. Just ancient traditions making me feel things that aren't real. And I'm done lying to myself." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I feel something. Don't know if it's mate bond or something else, but it's real. It's there, and I think you feel it too." Sera did feel it, had felt it since she'd pulled him from the water, since she'd held his unconscious body and felt something shift inside her, like recognizing someone she'd been searching for without knowing she was looking. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Most things worth having are." Kael's smile was slight, sad. "But we're Alpha King and healer with possibly illegal bloodline. Impossible is where we live." The evening progressed with Sera hyper-aware of Kael beside her, of his presence, his warmth, the way he kept finding excuses to touch her hand or shoulder, small contacts that felt enormous. That suggested something building between them that neither could name, but both felt pulling them together. Lord Ambrose approached during a lull in presentations, elderly, distinguished, face showing nothing but grandfatherly concern. "Miss Ashcroft, how delightful to finally meet you properly." His smile was warm. "Perfect. His Majesty speaks highly of your service, both in saving his life and in your work as healer." "Thank you, my lord." Sera forced herself to return the smile, to not show that she knew what he was, what he'd done. "Tell me, where did you train? Your techniques must be remarkable to have saved His Majesty under such conditions. Northern conflicts, my lord. Field medicine under combat conditions. Fascinating. And your family? Were they also in medical service? The question was trap. Sera felt it. I was orphaned young, my lord, raised in border territories. My parents died in raids before I was old enough to remember them. How tragic! But Ambrose's eyes showed something else. Calculation. No family history at all? No records of who they were? None, my lord, just me. Ambrose studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Well, you've certainly made something of yourself despite humble origins. His Majesty is fortunate to have such skilled healers in service. He withdrew, but Sera felt his gaze following her for rest of evening, felt him watching, assessing, comparing her features to some mental catalog of faces he'd ordered dead. He suspects, Sera whispered to Kale later. I know. I saw it too. Kale's jaw was tight. But suspicion isn't proof. And without proof, he can't move against you. Not while you're under my protection. And how long will that last? Until he finds what he's looking for? As long as necessary. Kael's voice was absolute. I meant what I said. You're under my protection. That doesn't end because Ambrose gets curious. It ends when I say it ends, and I'm not saying it. The certainty in his voice made something warm bloom in Sera's chest. He meant it, would protect her, would stand between her and whatever came, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because whatever connection was forming between them mattered more than politics or safety or wisdom. The third night of the winter gathering brought everything to a head. Sera woke to urgent knocking, not Thaddeus, not Liana. She opened the door to find a young guard, pale and frightened. Miss Ashcroft, there has been an accident. Training yard. Lord Victor Steelclaw was sparring and took blade to the chest. He's dying. The healers say only the best might save him, and His Majesty requests your immediate assistance. Sera's healer instincts kicked in before conscious thought could intervene. She grabbed her medical kit and ran. The training yard was chaos, guards surrounding a man lying in spreading pool of blood. Lord Victor, a powerful alpha from the Southern Territories, chest pierced by what should have been practice blade, but had somehow become fatal wound. The senior healer looked up as Sera arrived, shook his head. It's too deep, pierced lung, maybe heart. He has minutes at most. Sera knelt beside Victor, saw the wound, saw death approaching, knew with absolute certainty that normal medicine wouldn't save him, knew that only her power could pull him back, knew that using it would reveal her, would prove what Ambrose suspected, would mark her as Blackwell's survivor. Please. Victor's voice was barely whisper. Blood bubbled at his lips. Don't want to die. Have wife, children. Please. Sera looked up, saw crowd gathering, saw nobles watching, saw Ambrose at the back, eyes gleaming with anticipation, saw trap closing, saw Kale pushing through crowd. His expression when their eyes met said everything, said he understood, said he knew what using her power would cost, said he'd support whatever she chose, said he wouldn't order her to save Victor, wouldn't make her reveal herself, would let her choose her own path even if it meant watching a man die. The choice crystallized. Sera placed her hands on Victor's chest. Everyone step back, she commanded. Voice carrying authority she didn't know she possessed. I need space to work. Her hands began to glow. Not subtle, not hidden, bright enough that everyone could see, bright enough that there was no possibility of mistaking it for anything but magic. But power from bloodlines that should have been eliminated. The wound closed, flesh knitting together like time running backwards, blood drying, lungs reinflating. Victor gasped, eyes flying open, death postponed by power that proved everything Ambrose had suspected. Silence fell over the training yard. Absolute, total, the kind of silence that preceded storms. Then Ambrose's voice cut through it. Seize her! She's Blackwell. Illegal bloodline. She must be arrested immediately. Guards moved forward, hesitant, uncertain, caught between Council Elder's order and Alpha King's clear protection. Kale stepped between Sera and approaching guards. His presence filled the space. Alpha power rolling off him in waves that made even trained soldiers retreat. Stand down. Each word carried absolute authority. She's under my protection. No one touches her. Your Majesty, the law is clear. Ambrose pushed forward. Blackwell bloodline was eliminated for treason. Any survivors must be apprehended and tried. This is not optional. I decide what's optional in my kingdom. Kale's voice was deadly calm. and I decide that Seraphina Ashcroft is under royal protection. Any attempt to arrest her will be considered an attack on the crown itself." "You would start civil war over one girl?" Ambrose's face was purple with rage. "You would risk everything for a survivor of bloodline that plotted against your father?" "My father," Kale said quietly, "ordered genocide because he was afraid, because powerful healers made him feel weak, because it was easier to eliminate threat than learn to live with it." He paused. "I'm not my father, and I won't repeat his mistakes." The crowd erupted, nobles shouting, guards uncertain. Political crisis erupting in real time as Alpha King openly defied council elder over girl who'd just proved she carried illegal bloodline. Draven appeared from crowd. His scarred face was unreadable. "Interesting choice, old friend. Supporting her against Ambrose, against council, against law itself." He looked at Sera. "Tell me, little dove, are you worth civil war?" "No," Sera said, voice steady despite terror. "No one is." "Wrong answer." Draven's expression shifted to something almost approving. "Right answer is, I'm worth whatever he decides I'm worth, because Alpha King doesn't gamble kingdom on people who apologize for existing." He turned to Kale. "Shadow Ridge supports the crown. If Ambrose wants war over this girl, he'll have to go through us too." Isolde stepped forward. "And whoever us is, include the intelligence network. We stand with His Majesty." One by one, other alphas declared support. Not all, not even most, but enough that Ambrose's position became untenable, enough that arresting Sera would require starting conflict that would tear kingdom apart. Ambrose's face went from purple to white. "This isn't over. The council will hear of this. The law will be enforced." "Then change the law," Kael said, "because Seraphina Ashcroft stays, under my protection, as my guest, and eventually, if she'll have me, as something more." The last words were quiet, but in the stunned silence, everyone heard. Sera's breath caught. "Your Majesty." "Kael," he corrected, turning to face her. "And I meant what I said. Whatever connection we feel, whatever bond is forming between us, I'm claiming it, publicly, officially. Let Ambrose and the council deal with that." "You can't. You're the Alpha King. You can't bond with..." "With what? A healer who saved my life? A woman who makes me feel alive for first time in years? Someone my wolf recognizes as mate?" The word hung in air. Mate. Not just political alliance, not just protection, but mate bond. The kind that tied souls together. That made two people into one unit. That superseded law and politics and everything else. "We barely know each other," Sera whispered. "I know enough." Kael's hand found hers. "Know you're brave. Know you're selfless. Know you risked everything to save Victor, even though you knew it would expose you. Know my wolf has been claiming you since I woke up in that river." He paused. "And I know that mate bonds don't follow logic or timeline. They just are." Sera felt tears threatening. Everything she'd hidden for 29 years was exposed now. Everything she'd feared was happening. And yet somehow, impossibly, she wasn't alone, wasn't facing it by herself. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we deal with consequences. Together." Kael looked at Ambrose. "The council will meet tomorrow. We'll discuss the purge. We'll discuss whether laws written in fear 30 years ago still serve the kingdom, and we'll discuss whether genocide should stand as precedent or be acknowledged as mistake." "You'll destroy everything," Ambrose hissed. "Undo 30 years of stability, open door to chaos. Or I'll build something better, something that doesn't require killing people for being gifted." Kael's expression was hard. "Tomorrow, Lord Ambrose, bring your evidence, bring your arguments, and we'll see what the kingdom really believes about power and fear and whether survival should be crime." He turned, still holding Sera's hand. "Come, we have much to discuss." They walked from training yard together, Alpha King and Blackwell Healer, publicly connected now, publicly committed. The kingdom would never be the same. Neither would they. The council chamber filled rapidly as dawn broke over Thornfeld Palace. 12 council members in their formal robes. Pack leaders from across the kingdom, military commanders, royal advisors. Everyone who held power or claimed authority gathered to witness what would either be reformation or revolution. Sera stood beside Kael on the raised platform, acutely aware that every eye in the room was fixed on her. On the Blackwell healer who should have been executed 30 years ago. On the woman the Alpha King had publicly claimed as potential mate. On the symbol of everything the purge had tried to eliminate. Thaddeus stood behind her, hand resting on sword hilt. He'd appeared at her chambers at dawn with single statement. "If this goes badly, I'm getting you out. His Majesty's orders." Draven and Isolde flanked the platform on either side, making it clear that any move against Sera would require going through Shadow Ridge's finest and the Kingdom's spymaster both. Political theater, perhaps, but effective. Lord Ambrose Greystone stood at the center of the council's section, his distinguished face showing fury barely controlled. "Your Majesty, this is travesty. You cannot seriously be considering overturning 30 years of settled law because of one girl." "I'm considering whether laws written in fear and maintained through genocide should continue to define my kingdom," Kael said. His voice carried across the chamber. "I'm questioning whether eliminating entire bloodlines because they made rulers uncomfortable serves justice or just convenience." "The Blackwells were traitors!" Ambrose's voice rose. "They plotted against the crown. The purge was necessary response to documented conspiracy." "Then show me the documentation." Kael leaned forward. 30 years you've claimed this. 30 years the kingdom has accepted it as truth. So prove it. Show me the evidence that justified murdering children and burning families alive in their homes. Ambrose faltered. "The records are classified, sealed for security purposes." "How convenient," Isolde's voice cut through the chamber. "Records that justify genocide are too sensitive to review. Evidence that supposedly proves treason is locked away where no one can examine it." She stepped forward. "I was there during the purge, Lord Ambrose. I was one of the assassins sent to eliminate Blackwells, and I saw no evidence of conspiracy, just families confused and terrified as we murdered them for having power you feared." "You dare!" "I dare because I've spent 30 years drowning in guilt for what I did." Isolde's voice was steady, hard. "I followed orders, killed innocents, and I've been waiting 3 decades for someone to ask the right questions about why those orders were given." "Your Majesty, surely you don't believe this fiction." Ambrose looked around the chamber desperately. The Blackwells were dangerous. Their power could enhance armies, could turn common soldiers into unstoppable forces. If they'd chosen to rebel, they could have overthrown the crown. "But they didn't choose to rebel," Kael said quietly. "They served faithfully for generations, healed the sick, enhanced soldiers who protected the kingdom, used their gifts in service to the crown, and we thanked them by orchestrating their elimination. We protected the kingdom from potential threat." "You murdered people for being powerful." Kael stood. "That's not protection. That's paranoia. That's weakness disguised as strength." He gestured to Sera. "This woman saved my life. Could have let me drown. Could have saved herself and let the Alpha King die. Instead, she risked everything to pull me from that river. That's the action of someone loyal, someone valuable, someone the kingdom should celebrate, not execute." "She's Blackwell!" Ambrose's control was slipping. "She carries bloodline we eliminated. She shouldn't exist." "And yet she does exist." Kael's voice carried absolute authority. "Which means the purge failed. Which means survivors endured. Which means the council's genocide was incomplete. So the question becomes, do we finish the job? Do we hunt down every remaining Blackwell and eliminate them? Or do we acknowledge that trying to erase people for having power was wrong in the first place?" The chamber erupted in argument, nobles shouting, council members divided, pack leaders assessing which side to support. Political crisis unfolding in real time. Through it all, Sera stood silent, letting Kael fight her battle, letting the Alpha King defend her existence against those who would erase it. Feeling overwhelmed by his willingness to risk everything, to challenge 30 years of accepted history, to stand between her and darkness, feeling, despite everything, the mate bond growing stronger, pulling them together, making her certain that whatever came, they'd face it together. Thaddeus leaned close to Sera's ear. "His Majesty is magnificent when he's angry. Reminds me why I've served the crown for 40 years. "He's risking everything for me," Sera whispered. "Yes, because you matter. Because mate bonds don't ask permission or wait for convenient timing." Thaddeus paused. "And because he's better king than his father, willing to admit mistakes, willing to build something new instead of defending old evils." Victor Steelclaw, the Alpha who Sera had saved, stepped forward. His voice cut through the chaos. "Lord Ambrose speaks of danger, of power that threatens stability. But I'm alive because of Blackwell power, because Seraphina Ashcroft used her gift to save me when I was dying." He turned to face the council. "You want to eliminate her for that? You want to punish the bloodline that pulled me back from death? Then you're not protecting the kingdom. You're protecting your own prejudices." Other voices joined. Nobles who'd witnessed the healing, pack leaders who valued capability over tradition, military commanders who remembered soldiers saved by Blackwell healers before the purge. The tide was turning. Ambrose saw it, saw his position crumbling, saw 30 years of carefully maintained lies about to collapse, and something in him broke. "You're all fools!" His distinguished mask shattered completely. The Blackwells were too powerful. They made rulers weak. They could turn common soldiers into armies that didn't need kings. If we'd let them live, they would have overthrown us eventually. The purge wasn't paranoia. It was survival. The admission hung in sudden silence. "So you admit it," Cale said quietly. "The Blackwells weren't traitors. They weren't conspirators. They were just powerful. And you killed them for it." Ambrose realized his mistake too late, tried to backtrack. "I meant, the documentation clearly shows—" "The documentation you refuse to produce." Kael's voice was ice. "The evidence you keep sealed, the proof you claim exists, but can't be examined." He paused. "Lord Ambrose Greystone, I'm removing you from the council pending investigation into your role in the purge. If evidence exists proving Blackwell conspiracy, you'll provide it. If it doesn't, you'll answer for genocide justified by nothing but fear." "You can't do this!" "I'm the Alpha King. I can do whatever serves justice." Kael looked around the chamber. "The purge is officially under review. Any surviving Blackwells are pardoned and protected by royal decree, and House Blackwell is formally restored to honor with full rights and privileges." He turned to Sera, extended his hand. "Seraphina Blackwell, last of your line, I offer you choice. You can leave this palace, return to whatever life you had before, or you can stay, accept your heritage, and help me build kingdom that honors power instead of fearing it." Sera stared at his offered hand, at everything it represented. Accepting meant claiming identity she'd hidden for 29 years, meant becoming target, meant facing those who still believed the purge was justified, but it also meant not being alone anymore, meant standing beside the Alpha King who'd risked everything to defend her, meant embracing the mate bond, pulling them together despite impossibility and danger and everything sensible, meant choosing love over safety, connection over survival, future over fear. Sera placed her hand in Kael's. "I'll stay." His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, certain. "Then stay as more than guest, stay as mate, if you'll have me." The chamber went silent again, waiting, watching, witnessing moment that would reshape the kingdom. "You're offering mate bond?" Sera's voice shook. "Publicly? Officially?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "My wolf claimed you the moment I woke after the river. I've been fighting it for days, trying to convince myself it was just life-debt gratitude, but it's not. It's mate bond. It's recognition. It's certainty that you're meant to be mine, and I'm meant to be yours." "I'm nobody. I'm fugitive. I'm healer with a legal bloodline." "You're Seraphina Blackwell. You're the woman who saved my life. You're brave and selfless, and exactly what I need." His voice dropped lower. "And you're my mate, if you'll accept the bond." Sera felt tears threatening. Everything she'd wanted without knowing she wanted it. Everything she'd feared was impossible. Being claimed by the Alpha King himself. Being offered mate bond that would tie them together for life. Being given choice instead of having choices stolen. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." Kael pulled her close, kissed her in front of council and nobles and everyone who held power in the kingdom. Kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. Kissed her with certainty that said this was beginning, not ending. The mate bond snapped into place, not subtle, not gentle, overwhelming surge of connection that tied their souls together. Sera felt Kael's emotions flooding through the bond, felt his certainty, his protectiveness, his fierce joy at finally claiming what his wolf had been demanding since the river, felt her own emotions reflecting back, her terror at being exposed, her relief at not being alone, her growing love for the Alpha King who'd defended her against the world. The chamber erupted again, but different this time. Not argument, celebration. Witnesses to mate bond forming, to political alliance becoming something deeper, to kingdom changing in ways that couldn't be undone. Draven approached, his scarred face showing rare smile. "Well played, old friend. Very well played." "This wasn't strategy," Kael said, not releasing Sera. "This was necessity." Best strategies usually are. Draven looked at Sera. Welcome to the madness, little dove. You've just become the most protected and most targeted woman in the kingdom simultaneously. I'm aware, Sera managed. Good. Awareness keeps you alive. He glanced at Thaddeus. Commander, I assume you'll be shadowing her permanently now? His Majesty has assigned me as her personal guard, yes. Thaddeus's expression was stern, but something warm showed in his eyes. And I take my assignment seriously. I know you do. That's why I trust her to your care. Draven stepped back. Shadow Ridge stands with the crown, with the Alpha King, and with his mate, whatever comes. Isolde approached next. Bold move, Your Majesty, publicly claiming Blackwell mate. Council won't like it. Council can adapt or be replaced, Kale said. Fair enough. Isolde turned to Sera. Welcome to the family, such as it is. If you need anything at all, my network is at your disposal. Consider it wedding gift. We're not married yet, Sera said. Give it time. Mate bond usually leads to binding ceremony. Isolde's smile was sharp. And I do love a good wedding, especially when it involves political revolution wrapped in romance. She departed, leaving Sera feeling overwhelmed. Everything was happening too fast. Public claim, mate bond, political upheaval, all in span of minutes. Breathe, Kael said quietly, feeling her distress through the bond. I know it's overwhelming, but you're not alone anymore. We face this together. Together, Sera repeated, testing the word, finding she liked how it felt. The weeks that followed were chaos. Ambrose was formally investigated, his role in the purge exposed. Records proving the Blackwells had committed no treason were discovered sealed in council archives. Evidence showing the elimination had been ordered purely because their power made rulers uncomfortable. Ambrose was exiled, stripped of title and position, sent to border territories where he'd spend remainder of his life in obscurity. Not execution, not because he deserved mercy, but because Kael refused to become the thing he opposed, refused to eliminate threats just because they existed. 3 council members who'd supported Ambrose resigned, were replaced by those who valued capability over tradition. The council reformed, became something closer to advisory body than shadow government, and through it all, Sera adjusted to life as the Alpha King's acknowledged mate. It wasn't easy. The nobles who'd whispered about her glowing hands now whispered about her bloodline, about whether she'd entrapped the king with magic, about whether mate bond was legitimate or manipulation. But Kael faced every whisper with absolute certainty, made it clear that questioning his mate was questioning him, that attacking Sera meant attacking the crown, that his protection was absolute and non-negotiable. And slowly, grudgingly, the kingdom adapted. 6 weeks after the council meeting, Kael took Sera to the ruins of the old Blackwell estate, burned during the purge, left to decay as warning about what happened to bloodlines that grew too powerful. They stood in what had once been gardens, where Helena Blackwell had grown healing herbs and raised her daughter before assassins came, where Sera's mother had made her last stand defending infant she'd hidden. Thaddeus told me about your mother, Kael said quietly, about how she died protecting you, about how she killed 3 assassins before they brought her down. I don't remember her. I was too young. Sera touched crumbling stone wall. But I carry her power, her bloodline, her legacy. You are her legacy. Kael's arm wrapped around her waist. And we're going to honor it properly. I'm having this estate rebuilt, given back to House Blackwell, to you. Kael, you don't need to— Yes, I do. Because your family deserves more than being remembered as victims. They deserve to be remembered as what they were. Healers, servants, people who gave everything to the kingdom and were destroyed for it. He turned her to face him. And you deserve home, place that's yours, where you can build future instead of just surviving present. Sera felt tears streaming down her face. You've given me so much already. Protection, position, mate bond. How do I repay that? You already have. Every day you exist proves the purge failed, proves that trying to eliminate people for being powerful doesn't work, proves that survival is possible even when everything says it shouldn't be. He wiped her tears gently. You're living resistance to every lie the council told, just by breathing. That's a lot of responsibility for just existing. Welcome to being mated to the Alpha King. Everything becomes political. But his smile was warm. Though between us, when we're alone, you're just Sera, my mate, woman I love, person who makes me believe the kingdom can be better. You love me? The words came out whisper. Of course I love you. Told you that 6 weeks ago when I claimed you publicly. He pulled her closer. Did you think the mate bond was just political strategy? I thought maybe you were being strategic about claiming me, protecting me through bond because it was most efficient way. Sera. He said her name like prayer. I claimed you because my wolf demanded it, because looking at you makes my chest tight, because your smile is the best part of my day, because waking up without you feels wrong in ways I can't explain. He paused. And because I love you, not strategically, not politically, just completely. The confession broke something open in Sera. All the fear and doubt and wondering whether she was enough, whether the Alpha King really wanted her or just felt obligated, whether mate bond was choice or necessity. I love you too, she whispered. Have loved you since you defended me in that council chamber, since you risked everything when you could have just let them take me, since you chose connection over safety. Kael kissed her then, not the public claim from 6 weeks ago. This was private, intimate, promise of forever wrapped in present moment. His hands threaded through her hair, hers clutched his shoulders. The mate bond sang between them, amplifying everything, making kiss into something transcendent. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sera rested her forehead against his chest, listened to his heartbeat, felt absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. Marry me, Kael said. Not question, statement. Proper binding ceremony, witnessed by the kingdom, making official what the mate bond already confirmed. When? Soon as you're ready. Could be tomorrow, could be next month, could be next year. His arms tightened around her. Just want you to know the offer stands, that I'm committed, that this isn't temporary protection or political arrangement. This is forever. Tomorrow feels too soon. Next year feels too long. Sera looked up at him. 1 month? Gives us time to plan properly. Time for kingdom to adjust. Time for me to learn how to be queen. You don't need to learn anything. Just be yourself. That's enough. I'm just a healer who got lucky. You're Seraphina Blackwell, last of legendary bloodline, woman who saved my life, my mate, future queen. He kissed her forehead. And you're more than enough exactly as you are. The binding ceremony happened 1 month later in the palace gardens. Simple, elegant, witnessed by everyone who mattered and no one who didn't. Sera wore dress in Blackwell green with silver embroidery depicting serpent coiled around flowering branch, her family symbol, her heritage claimed openly. Kael wore formal attire in royal colors, but around his neck hung chain with pendant matching Sera's, twin symbols linking them, declaring publicly that Alpha King had bound himself to Blackwell healer. That power and healing had merged, that the kingdom had chosen different path. Thaddeus stood as witness, his weathered face showing pride. Draven attended with his pack. Isolde organized security. Victor Steelclaw gave speech about Blackwell gifts and how they'd saved his life, how eliminating such power had been kingdom's loss. And Lord Ambrose, exiled to border territories, received report about ceremony and understood absolutely that his world was gone, that 30 years of careful control had been undone by one girl who refused to die quietly, by one Alpha King who chose love over fear. The vows were traditional with one addition. Sera's promise. I vow to use my gifts in service to kingdom, to heal what can be healed, to honor my bloodline through action, not just survival. Kael's promise. I vow to protect what should be protected, to value power as gift, not threat, to build kingdom where survival isn't determined by fear. They bound their hands with silver cord. Let the mate bond surge through them, visible to everyone watching. Let the kingdom see that this was real, that Alpha King and Blackwell Healer had chosen each other completely. The celebration lasted 3 days. Nobles who'd whispered about Sera's bloodline now paid respect to the queen. Pack leaders who'd questioned the mate bond now acknowledged it. Even those who privately disagreed kept silent in face of overwhelming acceptance. The kingdom had moved forward, had chosen to grow beyond the purge's legacy, had decided that power wielded in service was valuable, not dangerous. 6 months after the binding ceremony, Sera stood in the rebuilt Blackwell Estate Gardens, watching healers train. She'd established academy here, place where those with gifts could learn control without fear, where Blackwell techniques could be taught openly, where power was celebrated instead of hidden. Kael found her there, as he often did, wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his chin on her head. "How's the academy progressing?" "Well, we have 15 students now, some with Blackwell bloodline that survived through hiding, others with different gifts, all learning that power doesn't have to equal danger." She leaned back against him. "Your kingdom is changing." "Our kingdom," he corrected. "You're queen now. Your decisions shape it as much as mine." "I'm still getting used to that." "Take your time. We have forever." His hand moved to her stomach, rested there gently. "Especially now." Sera froze. "How did you—" "Mate bond. I can feel it. Feel the life growing." His voice held wonder. "You're carrying our child, future heir to kingdom that rejected your bloodline." Sera placed her hand over his, felt the truth of it. New life forming. Child that would carry both Blackwell and royal blood. That would symbolize everything they'd built, everything they'd overcome. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happier than I've ever been. Happier than I deserve to be." He turned her to face him. "You've given me everything. Love, purpose, reason to build kingdom worth leaving to our children. How could I be anything but happy? I was just girl who pulled you from river. I didn't plan any of this." "Best things in life are unplanned." Kael kissed her softly. "I didn't plan to fall in love. Didn't plan to challenge 30 years of accepted history. Didn't plan to mate with last Blackwell healer. But I'd do all of it again. Would risk everything again. Because you're worth it. We're worth it." Sera stood in her family's rebuilt gardens, held by the Alpha King who'd defended her existence, carrying child that would prove bloodlines could be reclaimed, and understood that this was what victory looked like. Not triumph over enemies, not conquest or domination, just survival transformed into thriving, just power wielded with love instead of fear, just choosing connection even when logic said it was impossible, just being brave enough to claim happiness when world said you should settle for survival. The Blackwell bloodline hadn't ended 30 years ago, had only waited, growing stronger in hiding, preparing for moment it could return. That moment was now. And Seraphina Blackwell, Queen of Lysander, mate to the Alpha King, future mother to heir who'd carry legacy forward, would make certain everyone remembered, would prove that some things refused to stay dead, that some legacies survived through sheer determination, that love and power could coexist, that kingdoms could change, that the girl who'd pulled a king from drowning had saved more than just his life. She'd saved possibility, had proven that different future was achievable, had demonstrated that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was survive, and once you'd survived, the next bravest thing was to thrive. And thriving, Sera had learned, meant building something worth surviving for, meant choosing love even when fear was safer, meant claiming power openly instead of hiding it, meant accepting that she was Blackwell, was healer, was queen, was mate, was mother-to-be, was survivor who'd become symbol of everything the purge had tried to eliminate and failed, was living proof that trying to erase people for being powerful only delayed their return, and when they returned, they came back stronger. The kingdom would remember that lesson, would carry it forward, would build future where gifts were honored, not feared, where Blackwell name meant healing instead of danger, where power and love could coexist, where last survivor had become first of new generation, where ending had transformed into beginning,